let me put it a different way. And as an astronomer from a very young age, I'm kind of a little sad. But what I was trying to get at is basically we have conspiracies that are, neither here nor there. Like whether or not JFK was assassinated and who by, when it comes to Australian politics or UK politics, it's much of a muchness. But when you've got a global conspiracy that's allowed a dangerous product to market and allowed the coercion of a population to take it, that's a serious conspiracy that needs to be addressed. So I think my point was more to the effect of, is engaging in lots of little conspiracies that have less impact on the more important narrative, is that taking away the general public who, let's face it, it's one thing to get a few people on board with your way of thinking, but you do have to move the general public into the direction of finding some kind of change of government or some acknowledgement of what happened. And so my point with conspiracy, isn't it the left's point that you distract people with everything's a conspiracy so that you don't look at the dangerous conspiracies, like global governance, which is a very dangerous conspiracy?
The point about look, I don't think that we should appoint ourselves the arbiters of what is and isn't a meaningful conspiracy theory and what is and isn't a meaningful subject for people's investigation. Because, for example, let's talk about an even more trivial so-called conspiracy theory, the one to do with the Beatles. That Paul McCartney died in 1966 and got replaced by another guy who's been impersonating him ever since, or the moon landings. Let's say here you've got two things which are completely imprinted on the public consciousness. I mean, the Beatles are the most famous band in history, aren't they? I think probably the Beatles and the Stones. The moon landings is the thing that, apart from JFK, everyone can remember. People bought televisions in order to be able to watch the moon landings on TV. So it's the kind of the dawn of the TV age coincides, and everyone has a TV in their home now. Yes,
I've actually been to Parkes to the wonderful telescope where Australia, the big radio telescope down there, which is an amazing sight for people of Australia because we actually, for once, got to play on the world stage in an important role. Usually we're forgotten and left on the sidelines. So you're right, it was a global event.
If you believe that, yeah. I mean, if you believe that, I think that the entire moon landings narrative is a lie. I think lots of people were deceived into seeing something that they didn't actually see. If you accept, and I think anyone who's done the research should accept, but make up your own mind. If you accept that the moon landings were faked and that the Beatles were essentially the creation of the Tavistock Institute, which is an institute which has constantly manipulated people's minds. I mean, that is its purpose. It's designed to sort of shift public opinion by effectively brainwashing them in different ways. And the Beatles, just like the West Coast music scene in the US, they were all part of this movement to introduce sex and drugs to our culture, to kind of undermine the family, undermine traditional values. I think it's quite a big deal if something like that has happened. These are not trivial subjects. I mean, look, the entirety of the aware public, of the TV aware public. I mean, I'm not saying sort of people, Kalahari Bushmen will have been aware of it, but most people in the world will have been aware of the moon landings. If the moon landings were not real, if they were just a lie, you then have to ask yourself, well, what kind of world do we live in where people can lie to us on this scale? And what is their motivation? Who are these people? Who's funding them? Why do they do it? These are important questions. So I don't think it's unrelated to things like pandemic. It's the same people involved, the same people who want to lie to us. As I said, I call them the predator class because they are few, we are many. The only way they can control us is by lying to us on an epic scale. And once you realize the epic scale of that lie, you are beginning to understand the true nature of the world.